Hi, everyone. Welcome to our mentorship roundtable, Pitch Decks and Sizzle Reels, a case study. In this roundtable, Shawna Brakefield-Haase will talk about the process of creating a pitch deck and sizzle reel, what elements should always be included, and knowing your audience. Joining her will be filmmaker Bryce Leavitt. Together, they will break down their latest project materials and how they resulted in getting financing. Again, this is a great presentation. I have my notepad ready. Being a filmmaker myself, pitch decks is something I've always struggled with. And sizzle reels. So I'm looking forward to this, and I have some questions myself. So, Shawna, I'll go ahead and give it to you. You can go ahead and get going.
Great, thanks, Chris. Thanks for having us and creating this opportunity for us to share our knowledge with the community, because I certainly learn from the community as well. And love doing these kinds of seminars as a guest. So the reason I wanted to do this was because I'll just give you a little background. I am mostly a producer on documentary features and series, and decided that it was time that I transition into directing, producing, and that I wanted to start developing my own projects versus executing others, which has been a great journey. But, just wanted to push myself and try something new and from the creative role. So I, like everyone else, when we find a really cool story, decided, okay, I'm going to have to put a deck and a sizzle together. And when I started that process, I thought it was the most grueling, emotionally and psychological, brutal experience I've ever had. I really, and I had done some before, but not where it was like the stakes were higher for me because I was directing, and all of a sudden the vision had to come through and all these things. So the coolest thing about it, the cathartic aspect of doing a deck and a sizzle, once you get past the uncomfortable part of it, is think about it as an awesome opportunity to force yourself to hone in on what your story is really about. Because often we pick a topic and we know all the cool story points, but we have a hard time getting out from underneath the overwhelm that comes with the global research that we do when we take on a new project, right? Because we want to learn everything about it, and we know this is a cool story and we're totally attracted to it. But like, how do we really, really hone in on like, what's the sales pitch for this thing? To me, it was, like I said, one of the most brutal experiences ever. The deck you're going to see later from me took me 4 months of wordsmithing every sentence because I was so just paranoid that I was like going to miss a story point or whatever. So I just want to say, you're not alone. If this is uncomfortable and you feel overwhelmed and you've seen all these other cool decks and yours is never going to look like that, throw all that out the window. We're all in the same boat, and try to just have fun with the process and don't resist it so much. I hope that makes sense. So I'm going to share my screen. This PowerPoint is really just more of a guideline for this discussion, I'm not going to read it verbatim, but I wanted to just sort of have a little bit of a blueprint for us. And can everybody see that okay? Okay. Chris, you tell me if I'm off balance or something.
No, you're good.
Okay, great. Okay, so what's the purpose? Let's just talk real quick about the purpose. And Bryce and I are going to just kind of rally conversations back and forth throughout the whole thing. But so Bryce, if you have anything to add to this list, but I just listed out as a guideline a few things that a deck and sizzle could be used for. There's probably 20 more things not on this list, but you can refer back to this later. In the end, the purpose is a sales tool, period, end of story. So no matter who you're selling, whether it's a grant reviewer, whether it's a distributor, a financier, it doesn't matter. It's a sales tool for your reader, period. Okay, or your viewer in the Sizzle. Here's a few things you don't want to have in your deck or Sizzle. You don't want to over explain. You don't want to show how smart you are. I find this a lot in intellectual stories, or an intellectual filmmaker who's just more academic minded tend to over explain their story to the point where you lose them. So don't over explain. Don't over intellectualize to show how smart you are. Don't convey or relay information. Paint a picture. That's a big point that you have to remember. Don't just say, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. Boring. You want to paint a picture of these characters and the story and the setting and the environment, okay? In your statements that you're going to make. And then don't state a problem, illustrate it, okay? And we'll get into what that means later. So I want to talk about process. We're going to go over Bryce's process when he created Space Cowboy, and my process for Whitewater, which is, both of these projects, by the way, are adventure films that have recently obtained financing. So these materials are bona fide, they actually got the result and the product we wanted. So you're not getting something that's like in progress, we're still raising money, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And then we'll talk a little bit about where the deck and the Sizzle, how do they complement each other? Where does one start and end, and where does the other one pick up where the other left off? So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then I just want to say, in general, any materials that you put out that represents your team, your project, please, please, please make it the most pretty it can be, the most professional it can be. I would rather see a deck, for example, just like what you're seeing on the screen right now, black text on white with a really compelling story, than a badly designed deck or a put together, do it yourself mishmash of images that doesn't look professional. It doesn't matter if you're raising $5,000 with that deck or $5 million. It's a reflection on you. Find a good graphic designer who will donate their time. Figure it out. Be resourceful. I know they're expensive if you want to hire a high-end graphic designer. I do have a really great guy out of Colombia. His email will be in the bottom of this presentation, so you can reach out to Daniel. He's very reasonably priced. But I'm just saying, your imagery should be high quality resolution. Your layout, everything about it should be pro. Because imagine you're someone who wants to cut you a check, but when your presentation's so sloppy, they're going to be thinking like, are they going to manage the money right? Like, can they handle this project? Are they going to be able to execute? Because they had a hard time with the deck. So I can't emphasize that enough. Another thing we'll talk about later is the 3-minute rule. This is a book that I found while I was almost done with my deck, thinking I had nailed it. And then a friend of mine recommended this book, The 3-Minute Rule by Brant Pinvidic. He sold 300 TV shows using this formula. He did The Big Loser. He's got 1 million shows on TV, and he wrote a book. I listened to the audiobook, and I have it, and I bookmarked just all the cool. This is an amazing guideline. I tweaked my deck right after I read this book to conform with some of his recommendations. And the very first executive producer I sent my deck to said yes. So I can't tell you what a great resource that book is enough. Last thing, and then I'll ask Bryce to chime in here, but give yourself a break. What I learned was I was torturing myself on I didn't do enough research. I don't know enough about it yet, all of those things. And I thought, what if someone's going to hold me to the content of my deck or my sizzle when down the road, I'm going to do more interviews. I'm going to have more money to explore more avenues. I was really hung up on the fact that I felt like I had to know everything now, and you don't. It's just a guideline. It's a sales tool. It's a tease. You're teasing your story. Don't beat yourself up if you don't know all the storylines yet, because as we know, this is a discovery. Documentaries are an exploration. So give yourself a break. Okay.
Shawna, what's that book called again?
The 3-minute rule.
The 3-minute rule. Okay.
Yeah. It's you guys can look it up on Amazon or wherever your local bookstore. Okay, so Bryce, do you want to just talk a little bit about your process, and then we can actually show your deck first and walk people through, unless anyone starting to ask questions that
There's a couple that are in there.
All right, let me click over here.
Click on the Q&A. I think we'll get into some of this though.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we can wait because I think.
Okay. I'm going to also probably say some things that go totally against what development execs ask for. Sorry, but we'll go back to that. I know I can't undo my. All right, Bryce, let's talk about, sorry, can you guys see this drop down on my screen? I don't know how to get rid of this.
Nah, but you good. You good.
All right, I'm gonna stop sharing. There we go. So
okay,
yeah, Bryce, talk about your process and doing Space Cowboy, a little bit of history of what attracted you to the project, and then how you started creating materials around it.
Okay, so hi everybody. I am Bryce Leavitt. I'm a filmmaker from Washington State that's now living in LA. And I think I probably give a good balance to the other end of the spectrum for you guys, because Shawna is, been in this game for a long time. She's been on some really, really big doc features and series with some really big name filmmakers and directors in the space. And then I'm on the other end. I've actually have not finished my film. I just, like she said, I just got financing to direct my first film. So I'm kind of on the other end of the spectrum, but I used the my development materials, basically a deck and a sizzle is what I used to get through the conception of my film to finding financing. And I actually, Shawna, I guess I'm only on this call right now because I was able to use those development materials 2 years ago to get a hold of Shawna, who is, a very respected producer in the space. And I would say, and I'm sure she'll tell you too, is that the higher you get up in the okay, you have seasoned directors and seasoned producers, and then you have, production companies, and then you have studios and streamers. And as you get up, these people receive dozens of emails, hundreds of emails daily, weekly, with people saying, I have an idea. I have an idea. I have an idea. And you have to have, if you don't know these people, the first step is getting them to message you back, essentially, because they're just getting, they're working on their own projects and they're looking out for other good ones, but they're just getting pounded with mass amounts of ideas and, like she said, non-professional development material maybe. So I'll talk a little bit, I'll kind of backpedal for a second and talk a little bit about my project. I I'm probably a good case study because I had nothing to do with the filmmaking world prior to deciding to jump into it. I didn't go to film school. I didn't work for a production company. I was actually playing basketball professionally in Europe until 2020, until the pandemic hit. And when I came home, I was kind of going through my early life crisis, and I was like, all right, I had met 2 years prior, I had met a famous skydiver. His name's Joe Jennings. He's a skydiving cinematographer. He jumps out of planes with an $80,000 camera on his head and shoots skydiving scenes for Hollywood movies and stuff. And I just, when I met him, I thought he was the most audacious, cool dude ever with the most crazy career. And so in 2020, I was like, you know what? I'm going to make a feature film on this guy's life. So I was kind of in the same spot that all you guys are, I'm sure, are in to some extent with the projects that you're passionate about. And so the first thing I did was I went on IMDb and looked up every person that's ever made a film ever. And I sent out like a bazillion emails like, hey, I'm Bryce Leavitt. I'm a first time filmmaker. I have this idea, and got like barely any responses. But the first person that ever called me back was somebody that had actually they had just directed a ESPN 30 for 30. And they actually got back to me and said, hey, this is awesome. Can we see this is an awesome concept. Can we see your pitch deck? And I was like, what's a pitch deck? So they were nice enough to send me some of theirs, and I kind of cookie cut it. And I made one of my own. I made a makeshift one with my buddy as a graphic designer. So it looked decent. It was good enough. And then I went back out into the email world and sent another bazillion emails, but this time I had a pitch deck. And just from doing that, and I was mostly just emailing like seasoned filmmakers, my response rate, like just from having that deck, went way up, way up. Still was not like super responsive, but like, let's say if 1 out of every 50 people emailed me back the first time, it jumped to like maybe like 5 to 10 out of every 50. So like way more responses. And I end up then getting on the phone with this guy named Tyler Meeson, who is now my producing partner, who is he had just done a Netflix original series called true crime series called Murder Among the Mormons. And he was like, basically like, hey, Bryce, I like you. I like your deck. I like your concept. You got to go make a sizzle. He's like, go make something of this project. Show people your character, your world. Show them that you can make, industry standard product. Like, just go make something. And so I took that to heart, and I flew down to LA, and I slept on the skydiving guy's couch, and I hired a little mini crew, and I made a sizzle that you guys are going to see in a little bit. And that like unlocked everything for me. Like everything in filmmaking, like even as like Shawna said, is like about being able to just be really precise with your language. And, what's your story about in 3 sentences, 2 sentences, 1 sentence, and when you can just send a link with a video and people don't have to read, because what you find out, and it's super annoying and it's almost like disrespectful, but like barely anybody reads. Like, it's really like Sean will tell you, send them a deck with 20 slides on it, and then you'll get in a meeting with them, and they'll ask you a question that would have been answered if they read slide number 3. Like, they don't read. And so, which is probably a good thing to remember when you're sitting there trying to be poetic with every single word and like stressing out about it. It's like, I think it's just being precise and having some stylized visuals and stuff. But yeah, I ended up sending that sizzle out, and that led to an adventure that got me a deal with Vice Media. And then after I got that deal with Vice Media, I was pitching Netflix, HBO, Hulu, Amazon, ESPN, everybody you can think of. And I then got passes from them, got out of my deal with Vice after a year, and I took it independent. And then I took the same sizzle. I made a new deck because Vice, when we got with Vice, they gave us a new deck to make. We didn't care. My producing partner, I didn't like it. So we made a new deck. And then I took my development material again, and I went into the private market talking to companies and, you know, wealthy individuals that invest in films. And I just got investment from an individual. So to hone that rant in, essentially, like my development materials for me, not having connections in the space, not having a bunch of, you know, like a rich dad or something, and not having any filmmaking experience, like my development materials were everything. That was why over the course of 3 years, I went from just being somebody that wanted to make a film to pitching every streamer and studio you've ever heard of, and then eventually finding private money to make my film. It was not because there's anything wonderful about me. It was literally because I had a really compelling sizzle and my deck kind of honed in a story that made sense, that make people go, oh, that's a movie. And that's essentially, to kind of simplify things, that's how I view development materials. It's like, you're going to be talking to people like Shawna that have made double-digit projects and have been in the trenches and are just living it. And they've seen good, they've seen bad, they've seen everything in between. And like those people, they have an ability to look at a concept, because there's so many concepts being thrown around, and they quickly come to their own their own opinion of that's a movie, like, or it's not. They're like, oh, maybe that's like a YouTube video, or maybe that's just terrible, or oh, that will never sell, or oh, they're all very opinionated based on their experience. That's been my experience with these people that have been in the games, executives, everything. And so your goal is essentially to just have somebody look at your development material quickly and have that light in their head go, that's a movie.
Yep.
Because that's what people are looking for, is they want stuff that they can, I mean, you know, they're not going to ignore good things. They are going to ignore, you know, if they're going to ignore mediocre things, because they would rather give that stuff to the people that are in the good old boys club and already doing it. But if you're, you know, if you're a newbie in the game and you have development materials that screams like a good project, it won't be ignored. So that's kind of my experience with that. So maybe we could pull my deck up.
Yes. Set us up for this deck, Chris, if you want to share the deck. What did you want to set out to do briefly? And, you know, was there any lessons learned from Vice's input? Because I know they helped you with this too. Or no, sorry, you said you redid it. Go ahead, set the deck up and then let's roll through it.
Yeah, this is my third deck. My first one was pretty makeshift with my buddy who's a graphic designer, so it didn't look terrible, but it wasn't great. And then I would say that actually Vice, we didn't make one that I'm very happy with because it was overwritten. So if you want to, Chris, if you want to go down one, so our next slide.
Just pointing out on that compelling opening image is great. Note to everyone on this call. Go ahead.
So I would say that like something that I would kind of view your guys' projects in when you take your respective project and look at it is like, what are the strengths of the project? You know, obviously in a perfect world, you have beautiful material, there's beautiful imagery, there's this huge emotional journey, you got characters, you know, you've got all these things, but like maybe you only have some of that right now or permanently. And so when I was viewing mine, luckily skydiving is like super visually dynamic. So the first kind of thing that's the theme of mine is with the language, less is more, because I actually wanted to make a longer deck because it gave me an excuse to put more pictures in, because there's such incredible pictures that are involved with this. So that was just the strength of mine. So my like Shawna, yours is 11 pages, right? So yeah. I would say typically you see a lot of decks that are anywhere from like 11 to 20 pages. Mine is 26, and it would not be 26 pages if it didn't have imagery that basically keeps you engaged the whole time. So how I chose to do mine was, like you saw before, a title page with like a hook image. And then the next thing was basically my log line. So I'm sure everybody that's in, you're working in narrative, you're working in doc, like everybody wants you to be able to say what your project is in like 1 or 2 pages. Um, don't worry about too much about like memorizing or anything. I'll also make sure that this deck gets emailed to all you guys, or put the link in after, so you can cookie cut it all you want. But if you want to go to the next slide, that this was just like, I like, personally, what I've done some interviews, so I had quotes. So this is just like a quote from an interview. Like if you have like something like that, like something that sticks out, or like if your person did a prior interview or even a written interview and there's just like a quote from them, I like to sprinkle those in because I think it's a good way to break up. If you just have like a paragraph of text and then a paragraph of text and a paragraph of text, slide after slide, those ones kind of exhaust me. So I usually take the theme of like trying to break up the monotony with like just a slide that's only a picture or a slide that has a quote, something like that. So if you want to go next. So I think for mine is super, which most probably should be, besides select few that are about maybe docs, that are about events or places or in time or something. Mine is like very character driven. So the first thing that I wanted to do was like, all right, I have an interesting character. Like I wanted to shoot that into the people's face, because that's two things that people in the filmmaking space really care about, is access and how, like, can your character carry a narrative. It's like, so I'm making a movie about this guy named Joe. People are instantly going to want to know, that are like seasoned executives are going to want to know, okay, can Joe carry a movie for 90 minutes? Do people want to sit there with their time and watch this guy for an hour and a half on a TV screen? And so your kind of goal is to make them think, yeah, they can. So if you want to go to the next. So this is where it gets a little bit like getting into the text. And so what I chose to do was I chose to essentially break my story down into beats. And what I did, so how I started was I just pulled up like a Word document, Google Doc, Notepad, whatever. And I just wrote like my character's journey. Like he started here, this happened, this happened, this happened. And I had like 5 pages of like, all right, this is how it happened. And it's really hard because you get into this deck making and you realize that like us like what you're seeing right now, which looks like a lot of text, is like 3 total sentences. So you have to be able to like really like, not, like Shawna said, not take yourself too seriously and be okay just being like, all right, I wrote 10 sentences on this guy's childhood. Now I'm going to take 2 and put them in my deck. And not to get, you can kind of read through this when you guys see it later, but like how I view storytelling is there was like a video of the guys that created South Park a couple years ago. And they said that basically like bad storytelling, they simplified it by saying bad storytelling is when you say that, like what Shawna said earlier, this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened, is like boring basically. And the way to do good storytelling is essentially to go, this happened, so this happened. Or even better, this happened, but this stood in its way. So this happened, basically cause and effect more than just like a list. And so just trying to film it like that. And so how I kind of formed this was, and I really, went into it and dramatized it, essentially was just, this guy had a really bad childhood. So he took a one-way flight to California to start a new life. He was living a normal college life, but then he met this woman that introduced him to skydiving, who became his wife. So he tried skydiving and fell in love with skydiving. And then just all these like cause and effects that kind of lead to like what we call like story beats, essentially, and like trying to add in conflicts. You can scroll through a few more of those, Chris, but the main thing is from mine, I wanted to show, okay, there is conflict and adversity in this. My character has a whole lifetime of mental illness he's dealt with and some serious trauma. So I wanted to get that out I wanted to make it like highs and lows, more than just like one thing, where some of you guys might have, just like your character or your situation might have one huge conflict that you want to get into, which is fine. But you just want to show kind of peaks and valleys, I would say. And so that's what, yeah, you can kind of just keep going. I just, went through in order story beats a little bit of like, this is this guy's crazy journey. But then I threw in a ton of just like pages like this. And this one, by the way, was like, was done by like a professional designer. So this one looks, I think, really, really clean. They don't have to look this stylized, but it does, like Shawna said, it does kind of set you apart when people are seeing a million decks a day. If yours can kind of stand out from a design standpoint, it definitely doesn't hurt. But definitely just focus on the story. And then you kind of get into the end here, and this is where you guys will see this later, so don't worry about writing this down, but keep going. That's the end of the narrative, I think. So these are some of the other things that I chose to list in mine here. So I listed, because my character has some really cool like friends in his life, I guess, like there's minor characters, I listed off, I use that as an excuse to list off who else was involved in the film, who are all big names in the skydiving space, and keep going. A huge part of my film is the archive that we have access to. So I did a page to dedicate to that asset, essentially. Like, hey, we have all this archive. This is how this is how we plan to use it creatively, and then keep going. This is look and feel. This one was this would probably be the one that could go if you're trying to cut yours down, but it was just essentially like, this is how this film will look. Like, this is just to let people know we have a plan for this. Essentially, this is our creative approach. Some people have a slide that they call it creative approach. Same thing. And then this is my team. So this would just be your chance to kind of list the bio, who's involved in this project. And yeah, and that's really it. So like I said, you guys will see later you can dive into it later to see, but I would say, Shawna, I'll kick it back to you to talk about, what your thoughts are on decks and stuff. But like, it's really about just honing in. You want to just take them on a smooth little ride that lets them know, like, I have access, I have assets, such as I've interviewed, or I have archive, or I'm going to do interviews, and I'm going to use all this to make this beautiful kind of product, essentially. Oh, you're muted, Shawna. You're muted.
Sorry about that. This is why I asked Bryce to join this call, because I fell in love with this deck, and you're going to see his sizzle in a second. I'm going to share my screen just to highlight a couple more points, and then we'll get into the sizzle. Maybe I'll show my deck if we have time. So he talked a lot about his process, which is awesome. Hopefully that rings some bells for people. Here's a couple more things. And again, you'll have a copy of this. But I just wanted to highlight that in the 3-minute rule, some of the key concepts, which Bryce actually just demonstrated. He included all of these things in his deck already. So in the 3-minute rule, they talk about, what is it? What's the story about? How does it work? How are you going to execute it? Are you sure? Like, support it. And then can you do it? Those are some of the key elements. The process in the 3-minute rule that Brant encouraged me to do when I was finishing my deck was, he does with his story team. They get into a conference room with thousands of sticky pads, and they do 1-word phrases about the story or the concept or the film, whatever. It's a 1-word or a short phrase, and they literally paper the wall with all the concepts. And then they take all the best ones that resonate, and they make it into a bullet point document. And that is their blueprint for deciding what are basically narrowing in further and further and further and deleting until they hone in on the most dynamic elements of the story. So that's in this presentation too. A couple other things that I learned from the book was having a hook. So from your bullet point list, you might, and both of these apply to the Sizzle as well. So not just the deck, but from your bullet point list, if you use that process, you want to hone in on what's the most important thing, a statement of value. So that thing that's like, that's cool, right? So like in Bryce's deck, what's cool is this guy he's not just jumping out of planes doing stunts, he's actually photographing while he's doing it, which is like, to me, that's like a great hook. Then you want to have this, of course, the story, what happens, not necessarily what it's about. Like your whole deck doesn't need to be what it's about. That's your log line. The story is what happens, who are these people? And then the edge, and the edge is the thing that gives that little extra thing. So you're going to see in my deck, I'll point out the edge. In the 3-minute rule, he talks about what order things should go in and how long you should spend on each one of these categories. I modified it to fit what I thought was a cooler presentation. So you should always feel free to take anything anyone gives you and modify it to make it your own. There's no black and white to any of this. But the edge I thought was a cool thing, and it made me concentrate on like another, for me, it was kind of like another hook, but like something that creates people like, oh my God, that's crazy, right? Like in Bryce, what would you say the edge in yours? Well, the fact that there was a big accident, I think is a big turning point in your story.
Yeah, I think, it's almost like maybe this is saying what you're saying, but like you're always looking for kind of that second log line, I guess, is some people will call it. And essentially that's like your edge, I think, is what you're saying, is like, okay, I have this story on this amazing skydiver. That's already kind of a film in itself, but what's that extra thing? So mine was like, I have a story on this amazing skydiver that, because of some 2 crazy events, has had more trouble like on the ground than he has in the air. Like, amazing skydiver who's battled a lifetime of mental illness. Right. So that gives it its extra punch. And it might be like, this guy had an amazing NFL career, and now he's trying to get his son back, and it can be big or small, but just trying to find that extra thing using like language. And that's something else I should have mentioned in mine that you'll see in mine is, rather than have like 3 sentences that explain something, it's better to just have 1 sentence that has like some sales language in it. And what I mean by that is, instead of saying, we're going to build this film through archive footage, you might want to say like, we're going to build this film through 30 years of unseen, never before seen footage, or exclusive, or for the first time the world's seen, or, like
newly uncovered,
uncovered, like
recently discovered, like all these hooky little, that's a good point, actually.
Trying to kind of slip in subliminal things that make people think, like, because the other thing to think about when you're, and this is kind of a shitty part of the industry, but it's just a reality, is the way that you're going to get like a Netflix or an investor or somebody to want to do your project is basically if they think it's good, and then they think somebody else is going to do it if they don't. So like they get $1 million that they're like, oh, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. But if HBO is sitting there and they're like, this is good, and if we don't jump on it, Netflix is going to do it, they'll be like 10 times more likely to do it. So you have to, it's really stupid, but you have to make it sound like a hot commodity almost, like, like this is their chance to dive on, which I guess is just sales 101, but it's like So some of that language really does matter.
We're running out of time fast, so I want to get to questions. I'll let you guys read through the rest of this content, the presentation deck, because I think the examples are really good. I may or may not show my deck because I don't want to run out of time. I don't know, Chris, what you think, but I really want everyone to see Bryce's Sizzle. So why don't we show that? If we have time, I can pop my deck up at the end, but I want to make sure we get to questions since we only have 15 minutes left. And how long is the Sizzle? 3?
It's only 4 minutes.
4 minutes. Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you want, we can go over a little bit, if you guys got time, if you want to show.
Yeah, I can stay on, especially some.
Okay. I can stay on maybe 10 or 15. I have I'm prepping for a shoot next week. So I have my phone's blown up a little, but this is tired.
Somebody asked if you could scroll to the critical aspects slide.
Yes. You're going to all get a copy of this. And then I really just robbed from the 3-minute rule for some of this and then I did my own spin on it. So is that sufficient, everyone?
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any questions we should stop and address now before we show the Sizzle, Chris, or?
Critical content for the Sizzle reel.
It's pretty much the same except with emotion. And a rough outline on how long each one of these little structure sentence ought to be. And the 3-minute rule, again, it's just a resource. Use it or don't use it. But this guy just had a formula where he used to have 5-minute, 7-minute, 8, 10, 12-minute presentations, whether you were reading it or watching it. And he found the sweet spot was 3 minutes. That was the length of people's attention spans. And then he just fine-tuned that 3-minute pitch.
I'll drop the Sizzle reel in the chat box. We'll take like 5 minutes, so it's 12:45 now.
So we're going to have everyone watch it individually because we were having some tech issues. It just the audio wasn't coming through clean through Zoom. But we wanted you to have the best presentation. So we're just going to let you watch it separately.
Yeah, so it's in the chat box. It's in the chat box now. So if you need to, we'll set it so you can get back in this Zoom if you need to leave the Zoom or whatever you need to do. But if everybody wants to, please go down to the chat box right now, hit that link and watch the Sizzle. That's what we're going to reference in 5 minutes when we're back.
Start reviewing some of the questions.
Yeah. like I like what Philip said. He said 40 seconds in, and if I had $1 million, I would have thrown it at you fast. Love it.
Yeah, thank you, Philip. I'll take the investment.
We'll take about 2 more minutes, then we'll go back into the presentation. All right, Shawna, we can go ahead and get back going again.
Okay, great. Would everyone agree that's amazing? I love the sizzle. So we have 10 minutes, maybe a little cushion. Bryce, tell me a little bit about where you felt that the deck ended and the sizzle took over, or how they complemented each other. And we'll do short answers because we want to squeeze a little bit more in. But I just wanted to kind of help bridge that gap between the deck and the sizzle for you.
Yeah. So I with the deck, with writing, I was able to I dove in a little more into like, hey, this is I was like explaining a few things, like a little bit of like, this is the emotion behind this. This is where he started. This is where, he ended up. And it was a little more of like, I don't know, just like reading a short story essentially. Whereas my goal with the sizzle, because once again, the strength of my project was the visual dynamicness of the subject matter, is like, I just wanted my sizzle to like punch you in the face, to be like, wow, this is huge. This is big. This is premium, So the sizzle was more, I really focused it on the skydiving because that was just able to give me that unique like pop, I guess. So that was kind of my goal with the sizzle. And to answer a question that just went in, I actually hire the question was, what's the difference between a sizzle and a trailer? And the funny thing is, I actually chose to hire an editor to go over it that is does Hollywood movie trailers. Like that's what they edit for a living, is trailers. So I wanted mine to feel a little bit like a trailer. But the difference is essentially, a good trailer is supposed to not reveal anything. This is like oversaturated trailer where it's like, it's still exciting and it pops, but you're telling them, if you are able to, like what happens beginning, middle, and end. Like, if you already know how it ends up, you would probably put at least an inkling of that in the sizzle. Like you're not hiding secrets. You're trying to get somebody to be like, okay, I want to know more, but like, here's my character. Here's what he's, here's his intention. Here's his obstacle. Here's his arc, whatever you want to, however you want to frame your classic narrative. But essentially, like, you're not really trying to hide big things. Like, would you agree with that, Shawna?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Obviously, the clear difference is a sizzle is before you make it. It's not made yet. You're basically just teasing it because it's a sales tool, right? And then your trailer is after the film's been done, and it's the marketing person and team at the distributors who are going to cut a trailer together once the film is done. And there's all this new content, maybe new storylines, maybe a whole other added angle to it. And to Bryce's point, it's more of it's like a hook tease in a 30, 60, or 90-second way. That's a trailer. One of the best trailers I have ever seen is called The Great Alone, about the family of dog sledding competitions. And I'm totally spacing on the name of that race. It's a famous race. It's the most grueling race ever. If you get a chance, it's on YouTube, The Great Alone, 2-minute sizzle, 2-minute trailer, one of the best I've ever seen. So that's a really great guideline. I always refer back to that when I'm working on one. So let's start getting into some questions, because
I'll add one more thing based
Go
on
ahead.
that. You made a really good point, and just so everybody knows. Yeah, so mine's like mine's 4-minute, and it's obviously heavy and there's a lot there and stuff. Don't let that intimidate you, because Shawna just made a great point. Is the reason mine feels so complete is I have archival film. So even though I haven't produced my film yet, I know 80% of what happens because it's history. It's like mine's like a history book film, which are some films are like that, right? Where it's like you have access to prior things and prior knowledge, and you're telling a story that's already happened. I mean, half of documentaries are things where you're like, oh, this is really cool, and I want to go follow this now. So you just have to kind of lean in. So personally, that was a strength of mine, is like I actually already knew a huge part of like my character's arc because it already happened. So that was research I did with my character. I was able to do interviews. You don't have to do interviews. You just got to claw and dig. There's probably interviews, done, or home movies of your character, or them talking in a written interview or whatever. You just have to kind of get resourceful, and you have to take a step back and just take a deep breath. Like one little thing I'll tell you, and then I will let Shawna get back to it, is in the middle of that, you hear a news anchor announce the death of a major character in my film. Well, this happened in Canada. So I was calling all the Canada news stations trying to find this. I couldn't find it. So I just had one of my friends, I recorded narration and just had them pretend to be a news anchor. Because when I have money one day, like I do now for the budget money, I will go get the real newsreel of that. I didn't have access to it. So, obviously I wasn't going to lie and embellish anything, but I just had to get scrappy I just had to basically do a placeholder. And so that's what I did for that. So there's a million ways to do what I just said there. It's like, get resourceful of like, okay, you have some things and you have to get scrappy with other aspects.
That's actually a really good point, to get resourceful about your content and your sizzle. So another example is, if you don't have the money, or it's just your subjects are too far away, think about recording just their audio. Send them a good recording device, or help them download an app on their phone and record their inner voice, record an interview. So you have clean, crisp, really nice audio of your subject. And maybe you're just using stills or imagery to complement that. There's all kinds of creative ways you can communicate your story that doesn't have to cost a lot of money.
Cool. I'll go ahead and get these last questions, read them out, and you guys can take a stab at them. Let me see here. I had John Beater. He was like, amazing sizzle. Thank you both for doing this. I'd love to know the process of finding an editor for something like this. Also, same question for your selection of music and sound design for the sizzle as well.
Yeah. So for me, I had, you should be able to find, because you don't want to spend too much money when it comes to the editing, the sound design, the music. Their editors should be able to do that all. Like a one person should be able to do that all. Not obviously at the level to put it on Netflix, but definitely definitely enough to get somebody's attention in an email, which is what we're using these for. But basically how I found mine is I wanted mine to have a little more pop to it. So I looked up, there's an entire industry of Hollywood trailer editors, and I just looked up their LinkedIn's, and most of them list their private emails on their LinkedIn's because they do freelance work. And that's how I found mine. Mine was a guy in Boston. Now there's traditional documentary editors, and I think Shawna just put a link in, or put a name in to, there's some guilds and some alliances that have big lists of editors. So Shawna, is that how you found? You can also ask, like I said, like you can start by reaching out to filmmakers like Shawna that have been in the game for a while. And I always pick their brain with that. Like, how'd you make your sizzle? Who's your graphic designer? Who's your editor? And there's people that are happy to share those things. But personally, I found mine on LinkedIn, which is a really good resource. And I just looked up Hollywood trailer houses and who's working in that world, because that's the kind of style I wanted for mine.
Yeah, I use Luis. I don't know if you want to post your contact info. I dare say that because he's one of the best editors in documentary. He and Jordan work with me. They're working with me on my next project. And he's an awesome editor. So there he is. He just put his email. Okay. If you guys overbook him so he doesn't have time to work on my show, I will be really bummed. But Luis just put his info. Luis has edited Emmy award-winning content for a very high-profile director, Jeff Zimbalist, many occasions, and you would be lucky to have him, if even as a consultant. I also am putting in my graphic designer. Hold on. It's not letting me post. Why is it letting me get into the chat for some reason? Oh, well, it's in the end. Chris, do you have my my PDF of the presentation?
Yeah, I'll put it in there.
Okay. At the very end of my PDF is Daniel Ibanez, my graphic designer I use for everything. And he gave me permission to share his email as well. I hope that helps.
The other thing on the other side, like for people, there's a lot of great professionals in the space, but the other thing that if you're on the other side of the budget spectrum and you don't have any money to spend or have very few, is like try to get resourceful on finding people that are in your same position, but in those, find a graphic designer that you know is trying to get into the space, or an editor that's trying to get into the space, or people of that nature. Because if you have the money to barter with the professionals, that's probably the best. But there's a ton of talented people that are like, you're trying to direct a film, and there's a ton of people that are like at the same spot as you, trying to edit a film or trying to make a graphic or whatever.
And people want sizzles for their reels too, right? So like Bryce said, like just find a match for you. Someone who's like, and I haven't, maybe that he or she wants a sizzle, like the challenge of doing a sizzle. They've never done one before, and you guys can work together and both benefit.
We got I think 2 questions left. We'll get through these. Vanessa, they had a question. How do you build a sizzle reel if you haven't interviewed anyone prior to trying to secure financing?
That kind of goes into like what I was saying before, is like you just have to work with what you have. And so like Shawna said, you might just call up the subject of your doc and have a conversation that you record. Or what I've done before is I got like $100 like audio recorder, like a lower end but still like industry standard audio recorder, and I mailed it to the person and I had them just read some lines for me. But there's news clippings, there's pictures, you just have to find a way to, like, whatever you're trying to show. You might just show, if all I had in that deck you guys, or that sizzle you guys saw, was my character winning gold at the X Games, I might have just shown that and put some narration over it. It's like, okay, I could go on YouTube and find when he won the X Games and then put a few things of narration and my story points on it, and maybe I would have leaned on that. So you just have to kind of get resourceful on how do you get your points across with what you have, and how do you kind of scrap your way into more assets for your project. But it doesn't have to be. I was lucky enough to have archive footage, and I went and did interviews, and I did all these things. So but if I hadn't done interviews, mine wouldn't be as long as it is, and it wouldn't feel as complete as it is. So don't like let that intimidate you, because I've seen sizzle reels that are 30 seconds long, and they still, get you in the room like you want.
Last question, Susanna. I've heard a lot of more grant type of organizations say they don't want to sizzle, they like to see scenes. What are your guys' thoughts on this?
I have to admit, I am not a grant writer. I don't fund my movies through grants typically. I might just Southern Documentary Fund grant was my very first grant I ever applied for. So I think the work sample basically is like, that's a specific thing to grants. I don't think that is something that will be used outside of a grant submission that has a very specific request like that. And essentially that's if you're already in production, or you've shot some material and you want to just cut together a really compelling scene to show that you know how to build a story arc or a scene with the beginning, middle, and end. I think that's really more the purpose. But Chris, maybe you can even comment on that.
Yeah, grants. I'll put myself back on screen. Grants, they really, we like to see it if you have a certain story there, that you can build a scene like that. I mean, different grants, different organizations are different. Every organization is different of what they want with the work sample or stuff like that. But from hearing you guys talk about this specifically, sizzle reel is really the industry standard. Like if you're going for financing, like from a certain production company or streamer, right? Really, sizzle reel, pitch deck is the way to go.
I wish it wasn't, but it is.
Yeah, I've applied for a few grants where I actually just sent my sizzle in, and as my scene, and I just said, hey, this is what I have. So I did not have what they asked for either. But if I was, like Shawna said, if I was trying to do grants more, I would probably have tried to figure out a way to take one of the or two of the interviews I had and create just like an actual chronological scene with it. But I've never seen any execs or people that are looking for that right off the bat. Now, I think the scene can help you for sure. Like if you're able to show somebody at Netflix, hey, here's 10 minutes of my movie, that's huge. But the first step, you wouldn't even be able to show them 10 minutes of your movie until you get in the door, and the deck and the sizzle and how you try to get a hold of them via those two things is really how you get in the door. And I see a question here on the chat that my sizzle took me 4 days to shoot. I just shot interviews. I was just all interviews mixed with archive footage. That's all that was. So.
Last question that came through, then we'll close it out. What's a good resource for collecting archival footage and material?
Oh, wow. That's a loaded question. I mean, there's a million resources to find archival material. There's newspapers.com if you want to find newspaper clippings. I mean, there's a million different archival libraries that you can license from. Of course, the family archives, if that applies to you want to get all the personal archives from your subjects. So there's no one. I mean, there's thousands of resources.
Yeah, there's like stock. Like another place, if you don't have a ton of archive, is stock footage. Like your character might say, hey, I was born on a farm, and you don't have their childhood assets yet. So you go to stock footage and you look up a farm that looks like it's from that time. Like you want to have as much true media as you can, but you got to fill in the blanks being scrappy. So that's just, I would say, but first I would take your lead character, your protagonist, if you're doing a character driven story, and I would just like kind of hound them for like, hey, do you have footage from when you were a kid? Do you have footage from this? Do you have pictures? Do you have, that's where I would start, is with your character and their friends and their family, and talk to their mom. Hey, do you have their old yearbook? All that stuff.
Cool.
Thank you, Bryce, so much for joining me today. It was so great to see an actual high-end deck and sizzle. And thank you everyone for coming. I hope it was helpful.
Thank you. I just want to thank you guys again, Bryce and Shawna. Thank you again. This was very informative. Folks are, telling us, in the chat that they love this presentation. They got a lot out of it. I did. I can't wait to go back and watch this again, actually. But we will be sending this this presentation out, folks, in a couple of days through email. So folks that have signed up, they have to leave early. You'll be able to watch this presentation again. We'll send that link out in a few days. Also, if you're in Durham, if you're in the Triangle area, we have a film screening tomorrow night at Motorco Music Hall in Durham. We're showing the Elephant Six Recording Company. It's a project that we fiscally sponsor. It's about a legendary rock collective in Georgia. And we'll also be having one of the guys from the Neutral Milk Hotel, one of the band guys that will come up, be a part of the Q&A that we'll be doing afterwards, after the screening. So I'm going to put a link in the chat box. We only have a few tickets left. We're pretty much almost sold out, 250 seats. So grab your ticket now. I think we got maybe 4 or 5 left. So if you're coming, grab a free ticket now. I just put it in the link. So join us tomorrow night. We'll be at Motorco for the Elephant Six Recording Company screening. Again, thank you guys for joining us today for Pitch Decks and Sizzle Reels, a case study. Thank you again, Shawna. Thank you again, Bryce. Really appreciate this presentation. And you guys have a good one. We're going to do one more roundtable next month with John Beater. We'll be sending that information probably out next week for folks to sign up for that one. But until the next time, you guys have a good one.